Let me welcome you to Chat with Matt. In case you haven't attended one of my sessions before, I'm Matt Budd. They tell me I'm chairman of the Financial Executives Networking Group. And it's, as I hope all of you know, a hobby of mine. A hobby is defined as something you enjoy doing, you don't get paid for. I just want you to know that the idea behind Chat with Matt is to try to find interesting speakers for you who have something important to say about your career management process. And today we have Heather Hansen O'Neill, who is going to be talking to us about expanding your boundaries. I don't remember what was the title. I don't remember what the title was of this talk, but we're going to be we're going to be discussing how you can achieve greatness in a word. So with no further ado, let's see, I started us recording. We're going to spotlight Heather, and we're going to begin our conversation about achieving greatness. Heather, why don't you get us started here? I always like our guest speakers to discuss their journey, their career journey. So just tell us how you got to where you are, and that'll get us kicked off.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'll give you the abridged version because there's been a lot in my adventure, we'll call it. So I spend a lot of time helping people move from where they are to where they want to go. And today we're focusing on the expectation that where we want to go is that area of greatness that Matt was talking about. So I've always been in this element of movement and helping people do it. My journey is very interesting. I started dancing professionally at 13, a lot of touring, injured myself at the height of my career, learning very rapidly how to deal with overcoming obstacles and shifting your mindset when some extreme external situation infects or has the potential to infect how you feel. I then went back and got my degree, was in sales and marketing on the corporate side, and ended up golfing with one of my wonderful clients. Hint, hint to networking. We can't golf right now necessarily quite as much as we had before, but for me, it was the turning point for my career because I was working for someone else. And I had this idea for my business that I ran by my client. He absolutely loved it. And he said, you should do it. And I said, well, I'd love to, but I'm not sure that the company is quite ready for it yet. Hopefully soon. And he said, no, you're a fireball. You should do it. And if you start your own business, which I had never considered before, if you start your own business, I will be your first paying client. And if you do a great job for me, I'll tell everyone. And if you don't, I will tell no one. It was a situation
that's one of those no-lose situations, Heather.
Could not refuse that offer. It's really important to have that mentor, that angel that can guide you. And sometimes we have to be the ones to initiate that, right? And ask for that opportunity from people that we admire. And so that was 23 years ago when I started my business. Written a couple of books. I happen to do a lot of work, keynote speaking and consulting in financial services arena. And so when Peggy made the introduction to Matt, he thought, oh, this could be a good fit, right? So I'm here to serve you. I can share with you some of the tips and strategies and suggestions that I have given some of my top corporate clients, as well as some of the ones who are currently going through transition. And I'm open to any questions that you have. So please don't hesitate to type into that chat box, okay?
Good, yeah, give the chat box a workout. I actually found a piece of paper which has the title, Challenge, Choice, and Change, 3 Steps to Achieving Career Success.
That's right, that's right.
Kind of a snappy title, don't you think?
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you came up with it. So.
I thought it was good, but.
Yeah, well, it's sold me. So. Again, let me welcome all of you to Chat with Matt. And again, this is not a death by PowerPoint presentation. This is a conversation. And the story is, unless you ask questions, Heather and I are just going to keep talking. So that's where it sits. So why don't we get started? And why don't we start from the idea that you and I were discussing about moving from where you are to where you want to be, and our setting our minds clearly on how we can get there.
Exactly. I think that what is going on in the world right now with the length of time of all of this uncertainty and all of these external pressures and changes, it's causing a lot of people to think that they are not in control of their future, and that is completely understandable. But when we want to move from where we are to where we want to go, we have to own what we actually do control, right? And so it's not everything, but it's really important to know the difference between what we don't control and what we do. And so, for instance, a lot of people are taking and kind of grasping a hold of the things that are outside of their control. Pesky little pandemic, for instance, losing their job, someone else's opinion, the weather, anything outside of themselves. And it's a lot, they're allowing it to infect how they feel and how they move forward. But instead, if we can grab a hold of the things that we actually control, we can't change those things that are outside of us, but we can control how we think about it, how we feel about it, and how we respond to it. And so that's why I talk about that challenge, choice, change. We have challenges that arise all the time. You know, we're in a big one right now, obviously, but this is not your first rodeo. I am certain.
This is right. I agree with you, Heather. This is not new. Before COVID, we had age discrimination. Most of our group is older, and they have this belief that ageism exists, and of course it does, but because of it, they don't do anything because no one will hire them because they're old. So now we have COVID-19 and no way to start anything right now because we have COVID. Till that gets done, we can't get started. And it's not true.
It's not true. And here's why. When we give into that, right, what it does is it creates a state of fear. And what happens with fear, whether we want to call it that or not, it's a state of fear. And what you do in a state of fear is you clutch, you hold on tightly. Let's say you're in a state where money is part of the issue, right? Maybe you've lost a job. Maybe you don't have that same income that you used to have. What happens? You want to clutch to what you do have. And this element of holding tight is what happens in that state of fear. And nothing can come to you in that state. There's no movement, there's no energy. And we have to create the movement, generate the energy, and release the fear so that we have space for new opportunities to come into us. And that's our responsibility. We can't, you know, it's not necessarily, it may not have been our choice to lose our jobs or to be in a situation where there was a health issue, or those things are outside of our control. But that state of fear and what we can do, the strategies that we can take to release it so that we can take the actions to achieve that clear goal of what we want, that moving toward that success that we want, those are well within our control.
Yeah, I think I don't know if Peggy has ever mentioned it, but I'm a sailor, and when you're in a horrible storm, and we've been in quite a few, what you do is you shorten your timelines. You know, we're sitting here. I don't know how we're going to get through COVID-19, and honestly, I don't know how they're ever going to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, but they may. And in a storm, you may not know how you're going to get through the entire night with the storm raging, but you can probably get through the next 30 seconds.
Yes.
And if you can get through that, maybe you can get through the next 5 minutes, right? You can start expanding your timelines. I think that fits into what you're saying.
It totally does, Matt. It's a really, really good point. And when we, you know, when that wall is there and you feel as if you're stuck, it's really hard to see that. But when you get the when you get that aerial view and you look at things first from that high level perspective of the longevity of your career, or, you know, what could potentially happen in the future, there's a lot more freedom there instead of staying stuck in that small space. However, you need to come back to exactly what you talked about. When it is just too hard to wrap your head around nobody has a 5-year plan anymore, right? Because 5 years ago, we couldn't have called what's happened this year. People barely have a 1-year plan, right? We have 6 months, a month. What are we doing today? What are we doing, like you said, in the next hour to take that action toward the goal that we want? So we can envision it. We can take that aerial view and see what it is that we want So we know what actions to take, but with each action, we're looking at it on the micro level.
Yeah. So assuming the world isn't going to actually end tomorrow, how do we get ourselves mentally into that future state?
Well, there are a lot of different ways to do that. I will start. I know that you have an amazing crowd of financial folks who have an incredible background, area of expertise. You're probably really used to doing things right, crossing those T's, dotting those I's, making sure that everything is as it should be. So it may be a little bit more difficult to take that step back into that what could possibly be. And we think of what we expected or what we thought was going to happen or what the world expected of us. And that's where it gets scary because that may not even exist right now. And we may need to create something new. And that involves that higher level, right? So you may want to take a little bit of meditation time to clear the mind because clarity is the most important thing that you can have right now.
Oh, right.
When you're in a state of fear and you know where you are, it's sometimes really hard to see that where you want to go and to be able to clear your mind, clear your space. We call it that mental clutter. And Peggy was actually kind enough to join me on a Clubhouse on that very topic on how important it is to create space for what's possible because we want to draw opportunities like a magnet, right? Let me just give a little example here, if you don't mind, Matt. When you're networking, I'm going to jump into networking for a moment, but this applies if you're in a situation where you're in a job interview or you're in a sales situation or any of these situations. A lot has to do with energy, and this may seem a little bit foo-foo for you guys, but bear with me for a moment, okay? When you have been in a situation where you're in a live networking situation, have you ever walked into a room and been able to feel who you don't want to go talk to? And that could be based on body language. You may not even hear them, but you can see across the room that the energy of the person. You can tell that they're angry or they're complaining about something. It's in the facial expressions, it's in the gesture. That energy is repelling you, right? So you search around for someone who has that open presence, that energy that attracts opportunities. And the reason why that's important right now is that you have to recognize the power of that. If you are looking for opportunities to know what your energy is, what you are projecting out into the world, because we get very narrow focused on what we want. And sometimes we don't even realize how our energy is impacting other people. And we want to make sure that we have the energy that attracts opportunities.
Yeah, I think I've been involved in a couple of organizations with very large field sales organizations, and the exact kind of person you're talking about is called a bad seed.
Mm-hmm.
Plant the seed of a bad day on you. So you have to be very careful. Your first few sales calls in any day have to build energy for you.
Yes. Yeah. I love that you get that. You've seen that in action. That's amazing.
Yeah.
If I want to get,
and that's kind of what we talk about in our group as well.
okay.
We're a network. We're a real networking group. People actually know each other. To get into our group, someone has to recommend you. Actually, you have to be sponsored by a friend. So it kind of gets the whole process started.
Yeah.
And we publish a list of our new members every week, and it's like the victim selection committee. You know, a new member doesn't know anything, so when you call them up, they probably will take your call, and you can tell them something and get your day started from a networking standpoint with something positive.
And when you are that giver, when you're coming into a networking space from a place of service, when you're not just going into the situation asking for what you want or thinking about what you need, and you're coming from this place of how can I make this person feel more comfortable? How can I help connect them? What's going to happen is that's going to generate them automatically turning around and wanting to be of service back to you. It's not like you're selling each other in a situation like this, right? You're opening yourself to each other's databases.
Yeah, it's just a wonderful thing. So, you know, one of the things we do, and you're heading in that direction, is finding people who are just like you from within our group,
Mm-hmm.
to to figure out the future space or future condition for your career.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about that?
There's a couple of different aspects here. And one is, it is really important to find a community like you've created, Matt. Find a community of people that are like-minded, that are searching for similar ideals, that are based on common values that you're looking to achieve together. That's really, really important. I created recently during the pandemic, a community of people for people in transition, but it's very much related to positive, talented, incredibly experienced people, because when you get them in a room together and you brainstorm the collaborations, partnerships, new businesses, job opportunities, and that's exactly what you're building here, Matt, and what you've done for everyone here is you've created that space. And that's really, really important. And just noting here, Michael, that you're in the chat, that's awesome. So everybody connect with Michael. And if anyone else wants to do that too, I'm happy to save the chat and connect with all of you as well.
No. So again, this future state is very important, and figuring it out. I told Heather the story of where I come from on this, is that many people see a brick wall and they go and they bang their head against it instead of walking around the wall and seeing what's on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. And I loved that, because in one of my keynote presentations, I have this visual, this circular visual. So you have this issue in the center of the circle, and you're viewing the issue from your perspective, right? But if you walk just a little bit around the circle and look at it from your spouse's perspective, or if you're in a job situation, you walk a little bit around the circle, you look at it from a stakeholder's perspective, from a client's perspective, from a team member's perspective. If you keep walking around the circle, you'll see that same issue from different viewpoints, and you'll understand all of the solutions that are possible, why people behave the way that they do, and how to work together to achieve more of a win-win situation. So I love that walking around, because it immediately made me think about the different perspectives.
Yeah.
You know,
why try to break through a wall if you don't know what's on the other side?
Exactly. We have to get.
It might be a pot of gold, or it might be nothing.
You never know. That's why you have to.
Before we try to break through the wall, we want to see what it is.
Exactly.
Since you know Peggy so well, I assume you know how many different times she has reinvented herself. It's an overused phrase, but what it really means is examining what it is you actually do, which is oftentimes different from what you think you do.
Right. Right. And you know,
and by talking to other people who are like you will come to realize that.
It is important. It's important to get that external perspective of how you're messaging, of how you're getting that that idea of what it is that you want across. A lot of times we get this tunnel vision, and if we're not taking other people's perspectives into consideration, if you're not consulting with someone to get another another set of eyes on your messaging, you're not going to get the best possible option. I just recorded it yesterday. It's going to be next week's podcast, and it's on reinvention from Dawn Penfold, who has had meeting jobs, which is a specialty. She's been CEO of that company for, oh my gosh, since 1997. And it was just during all of this craziness right now, she was going to retire. And during a conversation in networking, she ended up getting an offer from Cadre to buy her company. And then she thought, well, this is great. I'm going to go to the country club. But they then offered her a great position to run it for the next 3 years. So she didn't have that in her mind at all before this conversation. All she knew was that her business was struggling, a business that was hugely successful for many, many years had completely dried up. Her industry was completely dried up. She didn't know what to do, but she kept having conversations and she was open to the idea of reinvention. And she's doing what she did, but now with a group of people that has re-energized her in a way that she never even realized was possible. And so when we open our minds to what is possible and don't insert, Matt, you and I talked about this, the power of our beliefs, some of them being good and some of them not helping us, that can keep us from being able to move forward. Some of those beliefs could be limiting us in a really big way. You mentioned one of them, I'm too old to transition right now, or I'm never going to get the salary that I think I'm worth, or I have too much experience, or I don't have enough experience, or whatever it may be that we have in our heads that we believe to be true is simply a belief. But is it really true? And is it serving you? And if the answer to those two questions is no, can we release it? Can we let it go and create space for something that's more empowering? And that's what I spend a lot of time on.
So we want to keep some structure to this, and you have challenge, choice, and change, and 3 steps. Why don't you at least walk us through that? This will be in lieu of a PowerPoint presentation.
Well, also I do.
So we're gonna provide you with our audience with some structure here.
Okay. Well, you know, structure is good. And I know that we all require a little bit of that to create comfort. But I tend to be someone who expands boundaries for a living. And so I'm going to encourage you that if Matt saying, oh, we're adding some structure, immediately made you breathe, you may want to actually question that. Because right now, there's not as much structure, right? And we have to create it for ourselves. And if you're in an environment where you're used to a certain amount of activity, a certain type of activity, given to you for your day, and you don't want it anymore, you need to create it. You need to create it. So I do hear, we do have, I want to get back to the, but I do have, I see a couple of questions here.
Now, people are just putting in their contact information.
Also, here's some background. So I'm questions if you do have them. Peggy, I think there's an unmuting situation, but that's okay. So as far as steps, the challenge is change. The challenge is looking at and getting clarity on what exactly is the big issue. What is the thing that the challenge that you want to remove, the obstacle that you want to remove, or the goal that you want to achieve, and getting real clarity on it. What, like that laser focus. Can you? Okay.
Whoever's not muted, would you please mute because it's causing a problem here? Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm going to mute all. We may have to.
Then we may need to unmute.
No, Peggy's muted. I think I'm still here. Are you still here? Yeah, you're still here too.
I unmuted myself. Peggy, you're muted in case you wanted to.
I didn't know what was going on. Thank you, Peggy.
Yeah, thank you. And if you were
feedback.
unmuted, because for anyone who was unmuted, if you were unmuted because you really want to ask a question, then please ask the question in the chat, and then we'll unmute. You can unmute yourself so that we know, as opposed to having the background noise. I'm very open to your questions. Please feel free to do that. Okay. So getting real clarity, like a laser focused on what it is that you want to achieve. I think the lack of clarity, the fuzziness on what people want is really impacting their ability to make the right connections, to message what they want properly, to know how to ask for not just the favor from someone, but how to set it up so that you can guide them in how to think about you and moving forward. So that clarity is super important, and that has to do with the challenge. And that recognition of the choice, that's the next step. Understanding you do have the choice and consciously choosing. Like every day, bad things happen. You know, you don't get the sale, you don't get the job. You may have an argument with someone that you care about. Every day, bad things happen. And every day, beautiful moments occur, right? You hear a child, right. You know, you do get the sale, you do get the job, whatever it may be. Every day, these things happen, and the quality of your life is determined by where you choose to focus. And
Yep.
people right now are focusing on those challenges, on those walls that they're banging their head against, like Matt said. And so we need to shift that and search for the solutions, staying solution focused and getting to that deeper why of why you want that clear goal is really important. And then that leads to the challenge, and the choice lead to the change. And recognizing that that's the most important thing that you can know right now is how to be resilient during change, because it's the most consistent thing that's going to be part of your future.
When I was in the world of work, which was over 20 years ago, well, I guess I still work all the time. But I had people used to stop by my office, and I had some cartoons on my bulletin board. And one of them was this guy, he's sitting on the edge of the bed, and he's obviously just getting up, and he looks pretty bedraggled. And his wife is saying to him, yeah, well, you didn't know how you were going to get through yesterday either, but look, here you are.
Yes. And that's the thing.
And I think people need to understand there will be a tomorrow.
There will be a tomorrow.
Everybody, no one's, one of the things we say in our group is no one's out of work forever. It just seems that way.
Exactly.
So you have to figure it out, and you have to get to the place that you want to be, but you can change where you want to be. I think that's where you come from, right?
100%. You can create that reality. And I was talking earlier with Matt and Peggy about the importance of being very attached to the actions that you take towards your goal, but not attached, not emotionally attached to the outcome. This is a really, really important point. If you leave with nothing else, when we can release our attachment to the outcome of each situation, but stay focused on taking the actions that are within our responsibility, that's when you can have peace and make steps towards success. Because when we become so attached to that one job, or that one situation, or that one outcome, or that one thing that you want, the universe will give you what you want. And I know this, once again, sounds really crazy, but every time I have ever done one-on-one coaching, literally every single time, when somebody comes to me and they said that they are absolutely devastated because they lost that job and they had no idea what they were going to do moving forward, every single time later on, sometimes it's a month, sometimes it's 5 years, later on, they will come back to me and they will say, that was the best thing that ever happened to me, because something better came along, something that they were better suited for, something that either brought them more money, more opportunity, more freedom, more of something, or less of something that they didn't like. And so when we recognize that that is possible, that a better outcome is possible, and stop getting so attached to any specific end result, you're going to make a lot of headway,
I love your reaction to this. I think people don't recognize that their previous state, whatever that was not permanent.
Right.
You know, just because it was at that moment, you know, it's just like you have a porcelain vase and you happen to drop it. Before it was dropped, it was beautiful, but you know what? It got dropped.
Yeah.
And you had no control over it. Let's assume you had no control over it.
Well, here's the thing about that I love.
And change was going to come.
Change was going to come, but I'm blanking on the word for it. I can look it up for you and send it to you, but I'll come up with it. But when a vase is broken and it's put back together in Japan, it is put back together with gold, and it has created something new and more beautiful. And that is their way of thinking, that they are appreciative of the cracks, because that's where the light comes in, that's where the beauty comes from. So if we can take that perspective of the cracks, the mistakes, the failures, every highly successful person will tell you that the reason why they're successful is because of the times that they messed up royally, because of the bad decisions that they've made, because of the times that they fell down and the lessons that they learned from it. The cracks are where the beauty comes from. So if we can see that, recognize it, and embrace it, and find out how to use that. Thank you. Yes, thank you.
I have the answer.
My
Yeah,
father-in-law used to say, could have been, would have been, should have been.
It's called Kitsingji.
yep. Lisa and Mark put it in the chat already for us, but thank
Okay, and it says in
Thank
Japanese,
you.
the art of putting broken pottery pieces back together with gold, a metaphor for embracing your flaws and imperfections.
it's a good one. Look it up after you leave here, guys.
It's a good thing to do.
Yeah.
And again, we always have to move on, regardless. If something happened, it happened.
Exactly.
You can't change the past, and you have to figure out some way to embrace the future.
Yeah, we can learn from the past. We can't change it, but
You
we
can learn from it, but you can't change it.
exactly. Just like you can't change another human being, contrary to what we think. And
There were problems in the world before COVID. There are problems with COVID, and there will be problems after COVID.
that's right. So that ability to be resilient, to be able to pick yourself up and be able to move forward anyway is the most important thing that you can do. Matt, can I tell the story about fitting into the costume?
Yeah, would you please? I thought that was a very interesting idea.
Okay, so I mentioned that I used to be a professional dancer, right? And so I don't know if you're familiar with the world of dance, but there's a lot of rejection. So
There's a lot of what?
there's a
Rejection, yes.
a lot of rejection. So you go to these auditions, and if it was for a Broadway show, for instance, they were called cattle calls because there were thousands of these dancers, and you literally would get up on stage 20 at a time, and the casting agents would just go, no, no, yes, no, no, yes. And without you even having danced at all, not a single pirouette. They do that first, and then you do it again after one pirouette. And then you have the opportunity to maybe dance a couple of steps. And then, so these cattle calls would take all day long, and most of them you walked away defeated. And so I guess I was on a little bit of a roll of being defeated, of hearing no. And there was a director that was at several of these, and he was a director that I had actually worked with before, and we got along really well. So he saw me with my deflated, my shoulders down, probably crying, if I'm going to be honest. And he came over to me and he said, Heather, please don't lose heart. Sometimes you just don't fit into the costume. And I was like, what? And I sat with it and I thought about it. And it really, I have carried that through with me in sales situations, as an entrepreneur, in working with large corporations. What he meant was that sometimes they have, that other person, that other company has a set of their own expectations of what they want based on what they had, this preconceived notion of it that has literally nothing to do with you or your talents or your skills, your experience, nothing to do with you. And when that's what I mean about releasing your emotional attachment to the outcome, because you not getting something most often has nothing to do with you. It has to do with what they have in their head or something else going on in their world. And it helps you to continue to move forward, because that thing that's your thing, that energetic, oh my gosh, this is the absolute best position for me, you wouldn't have it if you had gotten that other forced situation. You wouldn't have the opportunity.
One thing we didn't talk about was differentiation. You had it on your list, and I don't think we've talked about it really.
Yeah, I'm a big proponent of you being the one to decide how you're different. You owning you. I think in today's world, I mentioned that group, the Phoenix, that I run, that community for people in transition. Many of them come to me with this feeling of frustration because they've been told no and no and no and no. And when I start to uncover what's going on, they are trying to fit themselves into these job descriptions. They're trying to become what that potential employer wants. But when you can do the reverse, when you can own who you are and decide what your values are, what your skills are, the difference in how you serve clients, in what you do, what you believe in, and what you bring to the table that is very different from someone else. If you decide that and can find a way to communicate it, that's the difference, because people put together job descriptions based on a wish list, not because they actually need everything on that job description. What they want is authenticity, and they want you to show up as your complete whole self with everything that makes you special. And that's how you're going to stand out. It is really, really important to take the time to figure that out. And if it's working with Matt or with someone else to figure that out, that can be very helpful. But don't just try to become more, put on a jacket of who you think you should be, because then you have to wear that jacket every day, all day long, no matter the weather. And it can get arduous, to say the least. I mean, if you're going to change careers, if you're going to do something different or have a new position, you might as well have fun. It might as well be something that you enjoy, right?
Yeah, I tell people all the time, the position description, as you say, is just a suggestion. There actually is no one who fits it entirely.
Exactly.
And the key here is to know the parts of the work, the actual work to be done, that maybe you don't really know how to do, and to tell people that's why you're interested in the job.
Yeah.
Don't fall for it every time. You can't be everything. You can't be everything. You have to be yourself.
Mhm.
But
But also,
one of my other guests that said, "Be yourself. Everyone else is already taken."
right. And that is so true. But in addition, part of your differentiating factor could be taking the extra steps to really understand that company, and then finding where what makes you special fits in there. You may have to educate them on what that looks
Yeah, you may have a special skill that they really need, but they didn't even know it.
like. Exactly. Exactly. Can I share one quick thing? So I'm in the
Absolutely. This is your show, Heather.
so no, this is your show. I'm just here for the fun of it.
Oh.
But I'm co-authoring a book with an amazing gentleman named Will Lewis. He's 92. He defines ongoing, consistent learning and curiosity. I absolutely love him. He's incredible to work with. So anyway, the reason why I'm bringing this up is that he met Akio Morita, one of the founders of Sony, like 900 years ago. and he shared the story of how in many years ago, it was very, very much this way, where the United States was about creating job descriptions and jobs that were like bricks, where you create this job and then you try to fit the people into that brick and build the company. That's how you build the foundation. And how they did it very differently in Japan is that they chose people based on their intellect, their skills, their creativity, and they were like stones, and they were building stone walls and figuring out how the stones fit together so that it was the strongest foundation, that it was the most beautiful outcome. And so I think one of the biggest silver linings of our current massive challenge that we have had here and all over the world, but what it means for us here is that I think that more companies here in the United States are recognizing that we don't have to fit people into the bricks, that it's going to be a much better outcome if we allow more flexibility in how we work, in how we use our mind space versus our physical space, and how we create more together.
But one of the less understood issues in the world pre-COVID was that people actually only used to go to offices because that's where all the equipment was.
Right. Right. We have
really. I worked at the Thompson Corporation in the 1990s, and we had laptops. And my boss traveled 4 weeks out of 5. Okay, so and we were a marketing group. Our office was 25 offices, and some days it was just me and the receptionist.
Right.
If we had broadband internet, there would have been no reason for me to come in. So
I
now, moving ahead, and even in the 1980s, I was CFO of an ad agency, as you may remember.
Mhm.
We had the first intranet within our building.
Wow.
We had computers on what I called crash carts, and we were connected through the telephone equipment room. So you could print to any printer on the floor, and you could just plug in your computer. It was really innovative.
Edge
And now we're all connected over Zoom. I mean, really?
It's
This is all
amazing. You
fabulous
get
stuff.
along really well with Will. You would love him. Peggy, I could see that you were waving your, do you have a comment or a question, or does
Yeah,
someone else?
I liked what you were saying about the Japanese, and I was thinking about, and I wanted your comment on Jim Collins, when he talks about in Good to Great, and he talks about, it's really making sure that the right people are on the bus. You want to comment on that?
Oh my gosh, that is really, really important. And I think that this may be changing now, but in working pre-COVID, in working with companies, one of the biggest issues that we had is that people didn't fire fast enough, meaning that they would allow negativity, bad work ethics, different things to infect an entire team because they didn't want to let somebody go. And then realizing that when they cut that person who is infecting the team, then seeing the explosion of creativity, the raising of morale from everyone else on the team, it was almost like a surprise to them. But I think that it ties in a little bit with what you're saying, Peggy, is that we have to premeditate that. We have to choose the right people to move forward together. And that's why I spent a lot of time talking about how now we need to be more collaborative, and why so many partnerships are occurring in these new growing companies. Now, I don't know, everyone here probably has a very different philosophy on I guess, level of tolerance to instability. And so some of you may, really want the job within a company, but you may also have realized that it's not quite as stable as we once thought it was now. And so actually some growing a company with a partnership together is, at times people are finding it to be even more stable because you're owning it in your outcome. Your results are based directly on you and your input. But both are possible now. I think I did have a couple of people. I think Greg was one. Please, I know Matt and I could literally continue talking with no pauses for a couple of more hours. So I just wanted to take a moment. If any of you do have those questions, please type them in. Peggy will facilitate that. Don't be shy, okay? I can see it on your
I
face.
think because of your saying that you were a dancer, somebody wrote in, and maybe you want to comment about that collaborativity and a chorus line.
Yeah, of course. I think that had to do probably with the cattle call that I was talking about, because
Okay.
the line is, I could be wrong, whoever said, oh, Michael. Yeah, chorus line is literally, that's what it was like. It really was like that.
It's a statement about life, that the cattle call now is LinkedIn. People post jobs on LinkedIn. The search people, whether they're in corporate or search firms, will get anywhere from 500 to 5,000 resumes. And I don't know how they decide who to talk to and who not to talk to. Because a lot of people show up who absolutely will not fit into the costume. See, I'm picking up some of your language.
Absolutely, Matt, and thank you for that. I love that. I love when people pick up on the language.
They absolutely wouldn't fit into the costume. I don't know why they're here.
The costume. But here's the thing, and I do a lot of interviews with recruiters and resume people and experts in this arena, and so I'm just going to share with you that it's not my thing. That's not what I do. But we gather together the resources around us that we have. So I will just share with you some of the interesting things that even people who are experts in LinkedIn and resume writing will tell you. They might go through the whole barrage of how you need to have the right keywords, which you do, and all of this stuff. But in the end, every one of them will say that how you're really going to get the job is through networking. It's through the relationships that you
Yep.
have and that you build. And so one of the things I want to encourage you to do is to use net, and you're probably already doing it, so please forgive me if you are, but to use LinkedIn in a little bit different way than what you did in the past. Those people who may have seemed inaccessible a year ago are definitely open to learning from you, and so and to providing you with skills too. So that person who's in the career, the dream job that you want, reach out to them. You may think, oh, they're never gonna give me 15 minutes of their time. Reach out to them for an interview. I'm really interested in this type of work. Can you give me some pointers, or what do you love about it? What don't we know that I should really know, maybe I wouldn't like about it? Those types of interviews people are giving now more than ever because they have a little bit more time.
Somebody asked Heather in the core, it says, what is the correlation with fire in Fireball, Find Your Fire, Teams on Fire, etc.? They want to know that. Would you like to talk about that?
I'm happy to. And so, all right, so that gentleman who I was golfing with 20 some years ago, who encouraged me to start my own business, his response to me was, you're a fireball and you need to do this, and I believe in you. And so that just planted the seed. But as I started my business, what you have to do as an entrepreneur is figure out, just like anyone looking for a job, your differentiator. What makes you different from anyone else? And I will tell you that yes, I have a lot of experience. I've done a lot of different things. But to be honest, most people will talk about my energy. They will talk about the fire that I have and how I am able to find that within people. And even if that fire has been dimmed by other people telling you can't, or that idea isn't a good idea, or maybe that thing is a little outside of your reach, or whatever those things were that dimmed your fire, one of my differentiators is being able to find it, to fan it, and to make that inner flame brighter, so that you're following your passion, you're doing your unique skills, and you're getting paid for it. Imagine that.
Is that your laser coaching? Is that what you were?
Laser coaching, my books, he's right. It's all about fire. My company, Find Your Fire, my podcast, From Fear to Fire. My first book is Find Your Fire at 40. My second one's Teams on Fire. My new one coming out doesn't have a fire brand because it's a collaboration with Will. But in general, most everything that I do has to do with fire.
Yeah. Well, if you're it's force equals mass times acceleration. So if you don't have any fire, you're not moving forward.
It's about movement, and I talk about this a lot, is that, that I started talking about getting stuck and what we have to do to get unstuck and move you forward. That generation of energy can come from many different ways. It can come from your why. It can come from a strong purpose of something that's bigger than you, something that you believe in. It can come from simply moving your body. Like, there are a lot of different ways that you can spark that fire. But it's your responsibility to find the one that's going to work for you.
So I don't know that we discussed leadership and change.
We did just,
Did you put it on your list? I know you want to talk about it.
The last 45 minutes has been leadership and change.
Okay. Well, we've been more talking about personal leadership.
Yes, you're right.
Managing ourselves, which is one of the things we do.
And that's where, okay, so I do talk a lot with larger organizations. I spend a lot of time, that's a big market for me. When I do keynote presentations and training, it's for large organizations. But even when I'm talking to the company, I am always talking to the individual. I could have 1,500 people on a Zoom right now, or 4,000 in person for a keynote at an event. I am speaking to the individual because I believe at my core that leadership is from the inside out. And it doesn't matter what you're called. It doesn't matter where you are within the organization. Everyone has the capacity to bring out that leader within them. Not only do you have the capacity, but you have the responsibility. And right now, taking that responsibility, being that example for your kids, for your community, for prospects, whoever, for your network right here.
Mhm.
That's how you're going to get the job. It's leadership from the inside out. And that's why when I talk about leadership, it's interchangeable with change right now. And when I talk about moving from physical space to mind space, there's a lot of different things that could go into it, but I think we'd need a whole other session on that.
Yeah. Tomorrow I have a meeting of the Association for Corporate Growth. And one of the things that I do, and I hope all of you will do when you're attending meetings where they do have these meeting rooms, everyone, generally speaking, people will hold back. When I join a meeting room, I just take over and I start calling on people. And I would hope all of you have been in enough of our networking meetings through our Zoom programs that you do the same thing. If you have an opportunity to be in a meeting room, just take charge of it. They've been doing them for like 5 minutes. If you don't start moving quickly, nothing is going to get done in that meeting room. So just take it over. Just start calling on people. Why don't we go for you? Blah, 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 blah. Just keep the conversation moving.
But what you're doing, Matt, is you're rescuing them because people are in a state of discomfort, whether it's in a live networking situation or whether it's in these breakout sessions on Zoom or wherever it is. You're not the only one who's uncomfortable. And a lot of other people, if they're not speaking up, they're hugely uncomfortable. And you're going to rescue them by being the one to initiate, like what Matt's talking about. Not only will you have your voice heard and your message out there first, but in asking those questions, and especially of the people who are being very quiet, they have a lot to offer. And if you're the one to draw them out, they're going to remember that. And they could be the very ones that come back to offer you something because of what you did for them.
I agree with you completely, Heather, that Zoom is a new world, and it's very difficult to draw people out in a Zoom conversation. But all of you have been trained during our meetings, and I hope you will take advantage of that training and take charge of anything you can take charge of. And I like what you're saying about drawing people out. They appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's waiting to be asked.
Yeah, they really.
And it's hard to get a group of randomly assigned people engaged, but this is one of the tools they're using on Zoom, and it can be very powerful for you.
And some of those random groupings turn out to be exactly who you were supposed to meet. There's some kind of a connection there, something that is the perfect connection that you couldn't have orchestrated. And I just wanted to put it out there for anyone, if you want to, if you have a specific question that maybe you've been a little bit hesitant to ask here because maybe it's a little vulnerable or whatever. If you have a question for me, you can email me, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I will take whatever time we need to answer any question that is sent my way if you tell me that you came from this, okay?
Oh, that's a very kind offer. So, one of the things that you do when I say the 3 things we do are networking, and more networking, but it's actually 3 different components. The first is I always say hello to your old friends. If you don't keep telling them you love them, they don't know you do. Number 2 is making new friends. Mm-hmm. You always have to keep expanding your circle of friends. And I hope all of you are enjoying the benefit of our member directory search feature. A very powerful tool, only available to fanatic fangers like yourselves. So dig in. That's what we spend most of our money on. And the third piece of networking, which is relevant to these meetings you attend, is introducing your new friends to your old friends. So in a meeting where you're hearing people talk, be thinking who you can introduce them to. And by that gesture of friendship is how you make new friends.
I love that. That is the philosophy that I live by, Matt. So I'm so glad that you mentioned that.
It's core value here in our networking group. So what have we not covered, Heather? We've been talking for a little over 50 minutes. What did we not cover? There must be some additional topic, or maybe there's a question.
Yeah, I mean, please, if anyone does have a question, I know, Greg, you have to pop off. I totally understand that. If anyone does have a question, please type it into the chat area. I'm here for you. Literally, we've covered the majority of the items that we had on our list. However, like I said, we could dive deeper into any one of these topics and we could spend hours on it, but I know that we usually end within an hour, but I'm open to sticking around if anyone does have those questions. You know, while you're
Peggy,
thinking,
do you have a question? Peggy always has a good question. You have to unmute.
no, she does. She does.
No, Heather's doing great. I think that this has been a very insightful conversation and filled with a lot of energy, and hopefully you ignited other people's fire.
Oh, thank you. I hope so, and I appreciate that so much. Would you mind if I just shared one quick thing before we head off?
Again, Heather, this is your show.
Okay. So I'm also a little bit of an adventure junkie. So I like to do crazy things that other people really don't usually like to do, like jump out of airplanes or fly on the trapeze or swim with sharks and things like that. And it's really just so that I can take the stories that I've learned and share them with people about stretching our comfort zone, our boundaries. But I wanted to share with you something that I learned while surfing that I think is really important right now more than ever before. And it ties in directly with what Matt's talking about. When you're learning to surf, you're often looking at the wave, like you're sitting on the board and you're looking at the wave. And once you see the wave, then you swim and you pop up on the board and you usually miss it. I had a really good surf instructor down in the Dominican Republic, and he told me, you can't wait. You can't wait until you see the wave. You have to feel the wave underneath your feet, gently pulling you. And then when you feel that, that's when you start swimming and pop up on the board and you catch the wave. And the reason why this is important, and the lesson that I learned from surfing was right now more than ever, we have to get to the place of where we're feeling each other, where we have all of these walls built because of fear, uncertainty, technology, and we need to lower those walls. And when somebody says, yeah, I'm fine, if you feel that they are not fine, take the extra moment and ask them, no, how are you really? Come from that place of releasing some of the technology at times and becoming fully present with another human being, whether it's here or whether it's with a child or whether it's with a loved one. Just looking at them in the eyes and becoming present is the most powerful thing that you can do. And that is a differentiator.
Yeah, that is one of the things that I've been hearing is to be present. We're all so distracted these days with problems and with devices. And when you're talking to one person, Peggy tells a story about Bill Clinton. When you're talking to Bill Clinton, it's like no one else is in the room. And it's just an example of being present. And it's vitally important.
It really is.
But we've reached the end of our hour. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Heather, any client closing remarks?
No, just be you, find that inner fire and move forward as authentically and fully as possible.
You can do you can show them your book.
Oh, which one? Okay, so this
We
is,
didn't show any pictures.
this one is Teams on Fire. We don't
Yeah.
have a cover done yet for the new book. But yeah, it's a firebrand, it's a thing.
Well, Heather, thank you so much for joining
Thank
us
you,
on
Heather.
Chat with Matt.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And I'm going to spotlight you. Wait a minute. I wanted to remove spotlight. There we go. So all of you know we're in the middle of a fundraiser. So anybody who can contribute, we certainly need your financial support to continue these programs. I want to thank Heather again for joining us today, and she is very available. All of you have her contact information, and please do reach out to her as you need it. Thank you for joining us on Chat with Matt, and we'll do our best to put together more programs for you. Take care and stay safe.